What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome to a deep dive into the 28th ranked 2020 Carolina Panthers. Before we hop in, I do ask you guys take a second to hit that like button down below. If you want to support the channel, see this video, get more views, see my channel grow, it really helps out more than you know. So please take a second to do that. Thank you in advance. But anyway, this Panthers team coming in at 28th is going to be a few spots higher than I think a lot of people anticipated. And there's a couple reasons for that. I think there's actually some pretty good talent spread out throughout this roster. There's obviously a ton of holes, and I don't want to sell this team as some great playoff contender or anything, but there's a lot of pieces about this roster that I actually really kind of like, and we'll go into that very in depth when I get to the roster review portion of this video. But there's also something that I want to acknowledge with this team that I really don't think I've done so much with the Redskins, Giants, and Jags specifically that ranked below this team, and that is the overall direction of the organization. Now, I've applauded like the Redskins getting a good kind of high floor hiring in Ron Rivera. The Giants kind of all being on the same page, but that page is a physically minded, run the ball, play defense mantra. The Jags still with a sort of defensive minded, I guess, residue from the 2017 team. This Panthers team, led by an owner that I have really come to respect in David Tepper, is thinking big here. They're thinking long-term picture, and more important than that, modern, upside, offense. They bring in Matt Rule, an offensive guru from the Big 12 that's put up year after year after year of explosive offense. And David Tepper, the owner here, I genuinely believe in. We're talking about a hedge fund risk managing genius, a guy that aims big, and that's what they're doing here. But he doesn't just aim big, he hits it. He hits big. And also a guy that spent years as a part-time owner with the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the best run sports organizations in the world. So this guy knows how to get it done, and I think a lot of the moves that have been shown here, whether it's the roster building or the hirings themselves, Tepper has shown that he has a pretty solid grasp as far as like where this team needs to go to be like a Super Bowl team, not just some cute 9-10 win wildcard contender. He wants this team to become the Pittsburgh Steelers and be a forward-thinking, great organization. And I'm going to give this team a lot of credit because I think that you obviously can't get that done overnight, especially when you're changing coaches, quarterbacks, overhauling the roster. It can't get done overnight, but I love a lot of the moves that they've done, and they've put this team in position to compete now while also, not jeopardizing the future of this team either. So I really don't think that you can overlook all of that with this team, that I think they're doing an excellent job. And when you are on the same page like that, I think you are going to see flashes of brilliance with this team throughout the year, even if they have some pretty big holes on this roster. And that's a good transition now into the roster review here. So we're going to go through the roster position by position, talk about each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you are going to be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So yes, it is a video game, I get that, but it's a nice copyright-free graphic. They are my own ratings, and it accurately shows how I perceive each player, so do keep that in mind. And then after we go through the roster, we'll go through the schedule, talk about this team's Vegas over-under, and my win total expectations for this team. So here we go. I do want to talk about the coach and culture first. So they're going to come in ranked 29th. Obviously, we just have a lot to see this play out. You can't rank a brand new coaching staff terribly high. But like I said, they are going to rank higher than some of these other teams that we've talked about because I do believe in the overall culture and direction of this team. And as far as the offensive coaching culture, they are going to rank 22nd. We have seen a lot of offensive success from Matt Rule, and he's kind of handpicked some of these guys. Guys like Teddy Bridgewater, Robbie Anderson, that he thinks can actually come in 2020 and really play well with his scheme. And I think we are going to see a lot of big flashes from this offense that, quite frankly, doesn't have a ton of holes on it. And that's not even starting to talk about Joe Brady, who headed the LSU firepower that we saw last year. So, I mean, God, they're just really in the right direction with this coaching staff, in my opinion. But as far as the defense goes, Phil Snow coming in, a Baylor defensive coordinator who's basically going to have to rewrite his scheme a little bit. I don't think they're going to be able to run the Big 12 3-3-5 defense here. There might be some elements of that, but it's a massive question mark what this defense is going to look like. You can already see here the overall defense does not rank very well, but we're going to start talking about this offense because that's where some of the optimism is going to come in for this team. It's an offensive league, and they've put this offense in a position to succeed. They don't really have any glaring holes, even if there's plenty of room to upgrade throughout the roster. So let's start with the quarterback. It's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. They're moving on from Cam Newton here. It was the right thing to do. I recently made a video about his injury concerns. We talked about Tepper being a risk managing genius. It was just time, they didn't want to deal with that anymore. And they're actually going almost completely in the opposite direction of risk and going with Teddy Bridgewater, who there's not much more of a high floor, low ceiling starting caliber quarterback in the league. And he's going to rank 25th. And we don't really need to say that much about Teddy Bridgewater. Think of Alex Smith. Sort of point guard type of quarterback here. He definitely would lean even towards the game manager crutch. But I like the signing, especially when you look at some of the weapons that they have here that we'll dive into. But guys like DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, these are guys that are some of the best run after catch targets in the league. So they're going to play really nice with Teddy Bridgewater. And he's going to do a fantastic job, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league, just at getting the ball into your playmakers' hands in the short passing game. He is that point guard type that's going to distribute the ball and let other guys make plays for him. Now, he can make the occasional exciting play, but he knows. He knows that he's not some great vertical passer. That's not his game. That's not what the Panthers paid him, $90 million to come in here for? But I think the signing made a ton of sense. It's very consistent with how this offense is going to succeed. And I actually think it's going to work here. Now, you do have PJ Walker sitting there, the XFL MVP, or at least he would have been if they were able to finish this season. He was simply put, he was remarkable. He was the reason the XFL was wildly entertaining. Now, there's other reasons as well, but PJ Walker was kind of that main force driving the XFL, and he gets signed almost immediately here in Carolina as soon as they were able to sign from the XFL. And he's just an interesting player. I mean, he came out of Temple 2 years ago, kind of under the radar, good athlete, strong arm, but was buried behind a really deep quarterback room in Indianapolis. Ended up going to the XFL and really thrived. So there is a ton of hidden upside here with PJ Walker. And it does remind me just a little bit of the Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson quarterback competition in Seattle in, 2012? Where they actually invested a decent amount of money in Matt Flynn, but the third-round pick, Russell Wilson, was just too good in practice, and they ended up just starting him week 1. Now, Teddy Bridgewater is a much better player than Matt Flynn, and I don't think PJ Walker is as good as Russell Wilson. But it's important that every NFL fan know who PJ Walker is and understand that this guy could be a special player. He has everything. I mean, he looked like Patrick Mahomes in the XFL, quite frankly. His arm strength is not quite as good. He's never going to be quite as accurate, most likely. His processor might never be as good. But there's something there in PJ Walker. So we got to keep an eye on him. And then you have Will Grier here, third-round pick last year. He's much more like Teddy Bridgewater, going to be that kind of game-managing type now. He really did not stand out last year, could not get on the field with Kyle Allen there coming in after Cam Newton. Anything you get from Will Grier at this point is kind of house money. Now, he was a third-round pick, so he's probably going to be on the roster, and he's probably going to be QB2 at least from the get-go. But definitely an interesting quarterback room. I think that between Bridgewater and Walker, and even Will Grier, who knows? I didn't hate him coming out. I wasn't as high as some other people, but they are going to get competent starting caliber quarterback play, which is going to help because they've got the weapons here to have an effective offense, and they have the offensive mind in Matt Rule. So 25th for a quarterback. Let's talk about the running back here. It's really just Christian McCaffrey, man. He is the best receiving back in the NFL. He's very capable as a runner. And I rank them second here for running back. And like I said in my Giants deep dive, the only reason for that is because their depth here is not as good as the Giants' depth. It's Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, it really is a matter of preference. He is a special player. We talked about how he's going to play perfectly with Teddy Bridgewater. He's going to have a phenomenal season, especially in the receiving game. If we saw the first running back to get like 1,500 receiving yards here, I'm not going to predict that to happen. That'd be pretty freaking crazy. But based on how this offense is going to operate, McCaffrey he could just be like one of the leading receivers in the NFL this year. So you got to acknowledge that. And he is going to be great running between the tackles as well. So I don't want to take that away from him. But I will stand that I don't think he is, just as a running back, a top 5 guy. But as far as the depth behind him, Jordan Scarlett and Mike Davis are going to be kind of the, I guess, relief pitching 1-2 punch here. It's just not ideal. I didn't mind Scarlett coming out. He's got some of that power stuff you look for to complement Christian McCaffrey. Just not the best vision, not overly explosive, doesn't do much in the receiving game. Now, it is just year 2, and he could surprise. I did think it was a good pick for them last year. So we got to keep an eye on Jordan Scarlett. Reality is, as long as McCaffrey is healthy, he's just not going to see the field all that much. There's no reason for him to. Same thing with Mike Davis. He's going to bring more of the veteran experience to basically, handcuff Jordan Scarlett in a way to make sure that if anything does happen to Christian or when he does need a breather, they're going to be able to find someone that can, do the right thing and be there. Then you got Reggie Bonifant. I do like the Rodney Smith signing out of Minnesota. He's one of these sort of, think about Thomas Rawls, just a really physical, tough runner, but a guy that has a ton of wear on the tires and is definitely going to be a guy that if he gets the ball too much, he's going to be an injury concern. So I do like the Rodney Smith signing. I would bet that he makes the team over Reggie Bonifant. But that's the running back room. It ranks second. Christian McCaffrey is just a phenomenal football player and is definitely leading the charge as a running back. Nonetheless, for a lot of my optimism around this Panthers team and why they rank a little bit higher, even if I do stand my ground that he's probably a little bit overrated just as a between the tackles runner. So let's talk about this receiving core. Now, obviously, this is boosted from Christian McCaffrey, who is just going to be this team's, dare I say, number 1 option. So a bit of a unique kind of ranking here. It's reflected in the running back grade, and then I got to try to balance it with this receiving grade as well. So they're going to rank 21st. But it's not just Christian McCaffrey. I love DJ Moore. And he has shown the development that you would have hoped he would show as more of a raw guy coming out of Maryland, but one of the best run-after-catch physical guys at the receiver position with the ball in his hand. But he's developed as a route runner, his hands and everything. Like, he is well on his way to being a superstar wide receiver in this league. And this is a big year for him. And I love how his skill set matches with Teddy Bridgewater. So between DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey, I love that combination of all these guys' skill sets. Now, you got Robbie Anderson here. The signing itself, I liked. 2 years, $20 million for a deep threat is, in theory, a really good signing when a lot of these pieces are more short to intermediate passing game targets. The thing is, Teddy Bridgewater just isn't going to use him. I've said in the past that I like the signing, but if you want to talk about like fantasy football, I wouldn't go anywhere near Robbie Anderson. I'll be surprised if he has over 40 catches and honestly over like 500 yards here. I think he is going to keep defenses honest, and they'll use him just enough, and Teddy Bridgewater will hit him just enough that defenses have to be like, we can't let him over the top. But it's just not going to be a consistent force for this offense. So I like the signing. I think almost as more of a decoy here, he brings a lot and is going to open things up underneath for all these guys. So I think in that regard, he's going to help. But I am not expecting a big performance this season or next year while he's still here in Carolina. And then Curtis Samuel is the perfect third weapon here. Like, he is another one of these guys that not an excellent route runner, although he has developed in that regard. His hands are going to be hit or miss. He's a guy that could really thrive here with Teddy Bridgewater in this style of offense. I think he's going to have some big plays this year. Not just after the catch either. I'm picturing him actually running a lot of intermediate routes where he is pretty effective, running deeper ends, crossing routes, corner routes. He's suffered some pretty bad quarterback play as he's kind of broken out, honestly. Like, his film has been really good. He just hasn't had that opportunity to consistently show it because of the quarterback play over the last 2 years. But, man, this is a great, well-balanced offense. And then the starting tight end is going to be Ian Thomas, another guy that obviously has been behind Greg Olsen for the majority of his time here. He's gotten time to start, though. Greg Olsen's been injured, and he hasn't really broken out. I don't ever see Ian Thomas emerging as some great mismatch problem. Maybe ideally he would be a number 2 tight end, but I do think he's a good football player, and you could do worse at your starter. He's just a good, well-balanced tight end. He just doesn't have any elite skill sets. And then the room behind him at tight end is pretty weak. Chris Manhertz and Tamarick Hemingway. So I would say tight end is one of the worst positions on this team. But the depth at wide receiver, there is a very major drop-off after Curtis Samuel. So Seth Roberts, he's a decent number 4, I suppose. He actually started for Baltimore last year, but just not a guy that you want consistently starting. He's just very inconsistent in every regard. And then you got Farrell Cooper, who actually played really well for Arizona last year. He was a big reason that Andy Isabella couldn't really get on the field last year. Really good run after catch target, a good athlete, a good kick returner here. And he's going to play in a very similar offense. I think that Matt Rule's offense is going to look very similar to what we saw in Arizona last year with Cliff Kingsbury. After him, Keith Kirkwood had his time in the sun for New Orleans. Probably going to make this team as like the 6th wide receiver. I think he's an okay player. But do keep an eye on Omar Bayless. Coming out of Arkansas State, this guy was just stupid productive. I want to say he was behind Chase and Jefferson out of LSU as the most productive receiver in college football last year. Was just balling over a lower level of competition, making crazy catches, but he came out and ran in like a 4.6 40. You don't want to see that coming out of that level of competition, because you kind of need that baseline athleticism to expect that level of dominance to translate, basically moving up, I like to say, 2 levels of competition through true Division I and then all the way up to the NFL. So do keep an eye on him. And that's your receiving group as a whole. Like I said, I love the combination of skill sets. DJ Moore has that potential to become kind of an Amari Cooper, true number 1, Devontae Adams, the guy that is just a great receiver at getting open, but also an excellent run after catch threat. And maybe with some consistency at quarterback in year 3 here, we really do start to talk about DJ Moore as a top 10 wide receiver. But he's just not there quite yet. And that might be why this ranking isn't, in the top 20 or so. I think having that one guy that consistently keeps defensive coordinators up at night heading into the matchup, it is a big deal. And I don't know if they have that quite yet, other than, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield and that sort of thing. And then the offensive line, it's a decent group. They bring in Russell Okung, who at first thought I actually didn't like this trade for the Panthers, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. They started Greg Little at left tackle last year, Dennis Daly. These are kind of bigger, plodding, young beasts that probably project better at guard. And they traded Trey Turner, who's kind of a Pro Bowl caliber, for whatever that's worth, guard. Really good player. And Okung is older and is hurt all the time. But when I really kind of looked at this roster, it started to make more sense. Because if Okung can be healthy, and that's the major question mark, and why I didn't like it at first. I don't assume that Okung's going to play a lot of games here in Carolina. But this team does want to be effective on offense this year. Okung did play in 6 games last year. He was healthy, the last 2 years before that, 3 years really. He's not what he used to be, and he might not be very healthy here with a pretty major injury last year. But he is leaving that Chargers medical staff, which alone might get him healthy. Who knows? But I like this offensive line a lot more with Okung as that quality left tackle, and then figuring out guard later with guys like Greg Little, John Miller, who they bring in here, Dennis Daly. Getting that tackle spot, especially left tackle, it's much harder to do. So the more I've thought about that trade, the more I'm starting to like it. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy. So you got Okung at left tackle. I do think John Miller starts at left guard. Matt Paradise at center is great. If he can get more consistency around him, I think he'll play better. And then at right guard, you got Michael Schofield, Dennis Daly, Greg Little. I think all these guys are going to compete. And Schofield, also coming over from the Chargers with Okung, he's actually really solidified himself as a quality right guard. And that's going to help this thing out here. Like I said, you can figure out that guard position. You can sign a starting guard like Michael Schofield for pretty cheap. It's much harder to do with that tackle position. So The more they've kind of let this thing play out, the more it makes sense. And then Taylor Moton at right tackle is one of the better right tackles in the entire league. So, the offensive line, it's kind of a molding force here. They're figuring some things out. How healthy is Okung going to be? What are they going to do with Greg Little, who was a second-round pick last year? Is he going to start at left guard? Is he going to play at left tackle if Okung goes down? Both guard spots and that left tackle spot really kind of moving pieces right now. But they have the bodies in place to make this a quality line, and they've got some kind of foundational blocks at center and right tackle that are very important. And especially considering this offense is going to operate as more of that short to intermediate passing game, kind of like the Cardinals last year that had one of the worst offensive line in the entire league. They're not asking these guys to buy a ton of time in pass protection. And these guys are all really big physical players as well. They're going to run block pretty well for Christian too. So I like the offensive line. It's not some elite unit, but I think they have enough pieces to put together a quality starting five and be a league average offensive line. And that's actually saying a lot. I like to say that there's three types of offensive lines. There's lines that get in your way and don't allow you to do what you want to do. There's offensive lines that are serviceable and just allow you to do what you want to do. And then there's offensive lines that help you do what you want to do. I think this offensive line is very likely going to come right down in the middle there of an offensive line that's going to allow this team to do what they want to do and not get in their way, which is better than about half of the league right now. So I hope you can see now that we went through that whole roster, there's some pretty good pieces on this offense, and it's an offensive league. It's what gives this team the nod over teams like the Jags and the Redskins, the Dolphins, and honestly, the fact that it's an offensive genius here in Matt Rule as opposed to the question marks brought from Joe Judge and the Giants, that's what's going to push the Panthers up in these power rankings. But now, unfortunately, we do have to talk about the defense here. It's a very simple theme here. This is a young defense with a ton of question marks, and we don't even know for sure how Phil Snow is going to use all these pieces. So for now, he says it's going to be multiple, this defense. So is it more 3-4? Is it more 4-3? Really, it doesn't matter. Nickel is the new base. We know what position these guys are going to be playing as far as interior edge and off-ball linebacker. But we are going to start with the overall run defense here, which is mostly going to be about the interior defensive linemen. And they're going to rank very high for this. This is definitely the best part of this defense. You got Derek Brown, Kawan Short, say no more. I mean, Derek Brown, one of the better just run-stuffing, dominating interior defensive linemen to come out in a while. And he's going to help right away. Kawan Short next to him is getting up there in age, was hurt last year, but this is going to be one of the better interior duos in the league. And both these guys are going to help from a pass rushing perspective as well that we'll talk about in a second. But I also like the Bravian Roy pick in the 6th round. I actually thought he was one of the better nose tackles in this class at defending the run, and they clearly like him. This coaching staff is bringing him in from Baylor. Nepotism is real in the NFL, but I really like that signing. He's kind of your typical run defending nose tackle that I say you don't have to invest highly in that position because you can get a guy like Bravian Roy in the 6th round. So I imagine him and Zach Kerr, who was actually really, really good for the Cardinals last year. It's going to be a really good run defense. And then you actually have some good guys on the edge as well. Stephen Weatherly, good big-bodied run defending edge. Yetur Gross-Matos, I think, is going to be an effective run defender right away. Brian Burns doesn't have too much of a power element to him at this point. He's probably going to get bodied a little bit against the run, but they might do a good job not putting him in those compromising situations. Now, the linebacker group here really doesn't offer much from a run defense standpoint. Definitely doesn't help them at all. So overall, going to rank 13th for run defense. They're going to do a good job against that. Ultimately, run defense is much more about coach, culture, and scheme. So they're going to have to prove all those things, but the bodies up front really are going to help this team get in people's way when they're trying to run the ball on them. But then the pass rush here is going to come down a little bit, ranked 22nd. So Brian Burns, I do like. I've always been a little bit lower on him. A lot of people fall in love with the burst off the edge, the overall explosiveness, but you can't just win off of that alone in the NFL. Now, he will, over the course of a season, win a decent amount with just that speed and explosiveness. It's going to help him have 50 pressures, 8 to 10 sacks every year. Question is, does he channel it into converting speed to power is something you hear a lot, and he doesn't do that right now. That is how you become an elite pass rusher, is when you really instill that fear factor in offensive linemen, that it's not just, okay, this guy is not just going to try to run around me. He can actually stem this and run through me. Or a guy like Von Miller, who does have a bit of a power element to his game, but Von Miller is so good at setting up pass rush moves that Brian Burns just isn't doing right now. So, the counter moves, the power element, like that's all still very much something he needs to develop that I haven't seen quite yet, but he is very effective as a high-end number 2 right away, just because of the physical traits alone. And then you've got Stephen Weatherly and Yetur Gross-Matos, who I think are going to rotate. And I think in year one here, Weatherly's kind of that high floor, low ceiling veteran who's kind of crafty, but just doesn't meet the physical threshold or overall skill set to be a legitimate starting high-end pass rusher. Yetur Gross-Matos, kind of the other thing. Like he's young, physically explosive. I think it was a great pick in the second round, but just has a long way to go. If he's going to be anything close to a high-end number 2 pass rusher, he even has the upside of a number 1 pass rusher. But between Burns and Gross-Matos, I simply put think they're a year or two away from being a really dominant edge duo, but I don't think are going to bring that in 2020, and I think that's fair to say. You also have F.A. Obata, interesting veteran story. He's just kind of a crafty, explosive, lengthy, long skill set to kind of move around. Interesting to see how this quote-unquote multiple defense is going to use him. And then you got a pair of 4th-round picks over the last 2 years. Marquise Haynes, I don't think anything's ever going to come of him. I didn't believe in him coming out of college. I don't know if he was a 5-star or 4-star prospect or whatever, but kind of that, fed with a silver spoon prospect that just never really figured out how to develop his skill set. But Christian Miller, on the other hand, I did like that pick in the 4th round last year. Now, he's going to be the 4th or 5th guy in this rotation, but I think ultimately he can be the long-term Stephen Weatherly here, if that makes sense. Weatherly was the 3rd man to Griffin and Danielle Hunter for Minnesota last year. I think Christian Miller could actually come into that role and be a capable player in this pass rush. And then K'Wan Short and Derek Brown on the interior are going to boost this thing up. Brown does have a really good power rush element to his game. It was a reason I didn't hate this pick in the 1st round as opposed to some other nose tackle picks in the past in the 1st round. Brown does have a lot of explosiveness and power as a rusher. So while he might never be Fletcher Cox or Aaron Donald or even Chris Jones, he just might. I find it kind of unlikely. I don't think he has quite the explosiveness to do that, but he does have good get off and is extremely strong. He is a good bull rusher. So I do think Derek Brown will be a capable number 2 pass rusher, and then K'Wan Short is still a number 1 interior guy. He's regressing. We don't know how good he's going to be, but that's a good interior duo. So ultimately, they're going to rank 22nd. You got a good interior duo and an interesting, promising edge duo that probably isn't going to bring that fear factor in 2020, but is a good unit. But then the linebacker room, there's not even that much to talk about here. I mean, Shaq Thompson's a good starting cover linebacker, got a massive contract that he kind of needs to play up to. I think they're kind of paying him off of promise, a former 1st-round pick, hoping he can take that next step up with Luke Kuechly gone here. Is he going to play more weak side linebacker, middle linebacker? Again, we don't know the full scheme here. Ultimately, he is a really good cover linebacker. Could still really work on his route recognition, understanding how to play action better. He's not some elite cover linebacker. He's a very good cover linebacker that his athleticism helps him, but he's still got a ways to go. And as far as his run defense, he just does get overmatched. He's still ultimately that converted safety that isn't the best thumping linebacker. And that's why they bring Tahir Whitehead in here, a veteran. That's basically all he does is play physical and take on blocks. He doesn't have a whole lot of instincts or play recognition or coverage ability at all. He's just kind of a meh veteran here. Andre Smith is a 7th-round pick in 2018 that I actually liked. I would like to see him get on the field here. I don't know if and when that's going to happen. If they do go to a base 4-3, I could see him starting as kind of the strong side linebacker. And then you have Jermaine Carter, who's to me just going to be Shaq Thompson's backup as that smaller cover linebacker. that's really all there is here. It's just not a very deep, talented linebacking group. I do like Shaq Thompson. Does need to show some more consistency stepping into that number one role here that I think he can do, but I'm not comfortable ranking him as some great top 15 linebacker that he would need to be to get this up into the 20s for the linebacker ranking, because the depth here really is the issue, not Shaq Thompson. Then the secondary here, I actually like how this secondary is coming together, which surprises me the more I look at it, because it was not looking good before the draft. So you got Dante Jackson, who I love, and I think in year 3, I think he's gonna mature here. I think he's gonna come into his own, but he needs to do it. Like, he's just been inconsistent at best. He has great flashes, and that athleticism, like, he is one of the fastest, most, I don't want to say instinctive, but like sometimes he'll break on the ball, play in zone coverage, and it's just like, whoa. Like, I wonder what he could look like as a free safety sometimes, because his just first step, quickness, and just overall speed is special. But as far as like route recognition, press coverage, the physical element of playing corner, he needs to develop in those areas, simply put. They bring in Eli Apple. That was a really good signing. I was waiting on someone to sign him. I think it was it the Raiders that tried to sign him? Someone tried to sign him and it fell through. So I don't know what's going on there. I know he's had some off-field woes, but he's just a good quality number 2 corner, and this team needed to fill that spot. And between him and Dante Jackson, and then if Troy Pride starts in the slot, this team actually can run a lot of man coverage, because that is a lot of athleticism between Apple, Jackson, and Troy Pride. So I think we actually might see a lot of man coverage from this team. Again, we don't know what the scheme exactly is going to look like, but that's the way this personnel is kind of indicating right now. And then the safety group I really like. So you got Trey Boston at free, who's still one of the better secure free safeties. He doesn't have elite range, but like, he's a damn good free safety. He's been underpaid for a long time. I think he finally got an extension here, well deserved. Very quality player. And then the strong safety spot's going to be a bit of a battle here between Jeremy Chin and Justin Burris, who they brought in free agency. Jeremy Chin, a second-round pick out of Southern Illinois. He is a freak athlete, and I think we all want to believe in him, because that sort of athleticism should translate in the NFL. He's built like a linebacker. He might even play some linebacker here, like straight up, like a base linebacker. He has the size to do it. He played free safety in college, though. He's getting number 21 here. I think they plan to use him as the strong safety here, who is going to play some of that nickel linebacker, bringing in guys like Justin Burris and Kenny Robinson as part of a dime rotation. But Chin is an interesting wild card for this defense. I mean, I go back and forth on how much I believe in the guy. I have a lot of flashes when I see Jeremy Chin, though, thinking of guys like TJ Green, who's on this roster, who's a freak second-round pick out of Clemson, who just never developed the mental side of the game. Guys like Josh Jones, Sua Cravens, Taylor Mays. We've seen Jeremy Chin before, and it hasn't been pretty. Now, sure, there might be examples of guys like Cam Chancellor that made it work. So, a boomer bust pick, to say the least. Just a total wild card. Now, you do have a decent floor with Justin Burris, who played pretty well for Cleveland last year. It's just not going to be very exciting if he ends up winning that starting strong safety spot. And then, Kenny Robinson, a good 5th-round pick. They got a couple of XFL guys here. I like the risk management that we're seeing from, I don't know how much roster control Tepper truly has here, but guys like PJ Walker, Kenny Robinson, big, high upside, low risk additions from the XFL. 5th-round pick, was really good at West Virginia. All he's done is found the ball as a free safety. I think he's going to have a great mentor here in Trey Boston, and could be the long-term replacement at free safety. I don't know how much we'll see him in year 1. I think it might take an injury for that to happen. He could be the starting 2-shell safety, though, in dime packages. And then I actually like Quinn Blanding, too. Keep an eye on him. Not a great athlete, but a guy that has a nose for the football, can do a little bit of everything as a strong safety. I think he could get in the mix there with Chin and Burris. And then you have TJ Green, who we mentioned. Like, he is Jeremy Chin from the 2015 draft, I think. He's going to try and compete. I don't know if he'll make the roster or not. The corner depth, however, is a concern here after Jackson and Eli Apple. I do think Troy Pride, a 4th-round pick with great athleticism, is going to start in the slot. You do have Corn Elder, one of the best names in the league. Unfortunately, not one of the better players in the league. Has never really been able to solidify himself as one of these kind of undrafted slot corners or whatever, who's kind of that scrappy, instinctive, physical player, being a shorter corner. Cole Luke, kind of the same idea there. And then you have Stanley Thomas Oliver, more of an outside corner. I did like him. I think it was a good pick. I don't know if he's ever going to become a starter here, though. Maybe more of just a guy who's going to play on special teams in that sort of fourth corner that can come in the event of injury and not get lost. But that slot corner position is a huge question mark for the secondary. I think that's kind of, we talked about Tepper and the direction of this organization. We're seeing a team that's realizing, like, okay, guard, slot corner, maybe positions we don't need to invest a ton in because those are more replaceable positions. I think those forward-thinking organizations over time really start to develop culture and the benefit of the doubt and build teams the right way. So just a couple more examples. It's not just the Matt Rule hiring for why I think this team's doing things the right way. So ultimately, this defense not going to rank well. They're going to be tied for last. The roster talent just, there's upside. There's clear upside, but it's a ton of youth, moving pieces, new coach, new players, just a massive, massive question mark. Now, I actually like the way some of these pieces could come together, and it could happen sooner rather than later. A lot of that's going to fall on the defense coordinator, Phil Snow, here to make that happen. Not something I'm necessarily going to bet on for 2020. I do like that they, basically beefed up this offensive free agency. They recognize that we actually have some talent on that side of the ball. And then they were like, we are going all defense in the draft because we know this defense stinks. So if they pick the right players, this thing can come together faster than you would think. But, it's just hard to say, as with any team with a bunch of rookies on it. So there is your roster review. We're going to wrap this thing up, talk about the schedule here. It's not an easy schedule, which ultimately could work out for this team. If this means that they have a good season, think of like the Dolphins last year. If this means they can have a season of inspiration and seeing these pieces kind of come together, and you see some development in some of these exciting young players, but a tough schedule leads them to not win a lot of games and be in the running for a true quarterback of the future, because I think we all know that Teddy Bridgewater is a good quarterback, but not someone that this team probably wants starting in 2022. Ideally, they're going to have a higher upside, younger player in place by the time Teddy's contract is up. But they're going to start with the Rams at home. Not an easy win, but home openers get lit, man. I've been to a lot of them, and I am going to give that win to the Panthers. Not going to be an easy one. Could go either way, but then that's a really tough run. You got Tampa Bay, the Chargers. Arizona, I think, matches up extremely well against this team. This secondary is really going to struggle with that receiving core, and they're not going to be able to get after Kyler Murray all that well. So I do have them losing that at Atlanta. So losing 4 in a row, kind of starting to drop off pretty quickly here. But bouncing back with a win at home against Chicago. A really tough run again at New Orleans, Atlanta, at Kansas City, Tampa Bay. I think those are all too good of passing offenses for this team to keep up with. But then Detroit at home. I got them beating Denver at home. A couple of tough road games, though, in the NFC North, at Minnesota, at Green Bay. 50-50 game there at Washington, and then New Orleans at home. Should be a big game for New Orleans. I don't see them dropping that one. So I have them going 4-12. It's under their over-under win prediction of 5.5 from Vegas. I think this is a team that's heading in the right direction and are going to show some flashes of brilliance. I think this offense in certain matchups is really going to be a headache. If you aren't on top of it from a tackling perspective, these guys are going to be freaking annoying. With DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson is a potential threat over the top, Teddy Bridgewater with some scrambling ability, the play calling of Matt Rule that I expect to be very frustrating to deal with. I really like how this offense is going to look right away. It's just the defense, a lot of question marks. It's a new regime, but consider myself on board nice and early here for the future of this team. So a team that I rank pretty low, 28th, but overall pretty optimistic outlook for the future. And I think most Panthers fans are aware that this isn't going to be their year. But I think you have a lot of reasons to be hopeful for how your organization is looking. So that's going to do it. Please do hit that like button again, guys. Drop a comment down below who you think is going to be next. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.